Okay, in this final part of the Lab 3 video tutorial, we're going to again look at this question of exporting maps. We spent quite a bit of time on this in previous tutorials, and that's because it really is one of the most powerful tools that GIS have. Maps can act as powerful and helpful aids to displaying our individual research questions, and what we want to look at today is some of the tricks we can use to best display raster data. Now, raster data, unlike vector data, can't really be layered in the same way. For example, it's very difficult to layer a digital elevation model over a slope map. And so often one of the tricks used by people in using GIS when showing raster data is to use multiple data frames on the same image. So showing the same area and the same extent and just different data on the same image using multiple data frames. Now, I introduced data frames to you in the last lab. If you remember, we inserted a new data frame to show the extent of our research area on a map of the outlines of Ireland, and we put that into the top right hand corner of our image. Today we're going to use data frames slightly differently. We're actually going to create two equal data frames, and we are going to place them in an image which we will then export. So the first thing we need to do is switch from our data view to our layout view. You'll see immediately that we're back at this A4 page. Now, it's more likely, because of the previous work we've done, that this A4 page will be a landscape as opposed to portrait, which means it's kind of lying on its side as opposed to up like this. So we can always just switch that by going into File, and if we go into Page and Print Setup, we can switch between landscape and portrait. We're going to leave it at portrait as it is now, so we can click OK. Now, what we want to do here is we want to add a new data frame. We can see here that this was our landscape view. We've now kept the landscape data frame, but we've actually put it in the top of a portrait page. So what we want to do is basically replicate this data frame down here, but instead of having the digital elevation model, we want to have the slope map. So we can go into Insert and Data Frame. We can see here that we have our new data frame, so let's drag that down, and then let's make that fit the page, like so. Okay, so we can see up here that when we click on this data frame, it becomes active, it becomes in bold, and we can see all the data we have in here. In our new data frame, we actually don't have any data at the moment, but we do want data. And what we want in here is we want much the same data as we have in the top one. So we want our Ireland towns, we want Boyne River, and we want Ireland counties. We just also want to bring in the slope map because we want to have two images, one showing the location of Navan Town on a digital elevation model and one showing the location of Navan Town on a slope map. So there's two ways of doing this. One way is just to re-add the data to our data frame, making sure it's active and clicking Add. And then we would go back to where we have saved our data. And we can add whichever data we want. So let's say add Ireland towns. And this will add the entire data set to our new frame. The other way of doing it is, rather than going through all the hassle of re-adding the data, is we can cut and paste or just click and drag from one layer into the other. Now, this won't remove a data frame. What it will do is it will copy and paste it. So if we want to, say, bring down the Boyne data set, all we have to do is click on it, drag it down and drop it into our new data frame. So we'll do that, click, drag, drop. And let's just zoom into our relevant area a bit closer. Okay. And this is going to be our area here, Navan Town. We can get it more correct in a minute, but let's get into the right general area first. Excellent. So now we can see that we basically have our Navan town point. We have the River Boyne running through it, but we don't actually yet have a raster data set on the other side. Okay, so when making multiple data frames, it's important just to be sure that the symbology is the same between the two. So for example, our River Boyne here has come in a nice blue colour, that's fine, but we just need to alter the symbology of our Ireland Town dataset just to look more like the Ireland Town dataset we have in the top data frame. So we can go into Properties, and up here it's a smaller, you'll see it's a smaller dot, so we're just going to do the same. We're also going to add a label, so we can do that while we're here. And then in symbology we can just click on this. You can change it to a dark color and then just shrink down the size a little bit. Click OK. And OK. Right, so we actually have a very similar image now. We have Navan up here and we have Meath here as in this thing, so I don't think there's a need to label it again here. So let's actually leave the Ireland Counties data set out of this. Now what we need to do is we need to bring in the slope. So we can do this again either by re-adding it or just by clicking and dragging, which is what I'll do here. We can see it's added the slope data to this area here. So while up here we have a digital elevation model, down here we have a slope map. Now we do need to change the symbology around slightly here. Our River Boyne, for example, is appearing very, very skinny. So let's increase the size of that just slightly. Five. And now the key thing is actually to change the symbology of the slope. So as always, if we find a data frame we like, we can play around, either invert it or leave it the right color which we want. So at the moment, what I've done is I've set it that the highest value of slope is going to be in red, and the lowest value in slope is going to be in blue, and the kind of middling values will be in this kind of cream color here. Okay, so there's your image. And we have on the top our digital elevation model and on the bottom our slope map. So if we want to export that again, all we have to do is go to File, Export Map, and we're given the option again of choosing our file type and our resolution, and we're going to export this as a JPEG with a resolution of 200 dpi, which is dots per inch. And just to state here that whereas we've used 2 data frames here, it's possible really to use as many data frames as you want. So for example, if you wanted to create a composite image which had 4 data frames, one showing say just the standard vector data, one showing your digital elevation model, one showing slope, and one showing aspect, you could do it just the exact same way. You just want to make sure that you have 4 individual data frames as opposed to the 2 we've had here. So let's save this in our says lab 3 folder, and we'll save it as lab 3, that's fine. Its file type is JPEG and our resolution as 200 dpi. And you see here we haven't actually put in a legend. You could put in a legend if you want to, but just for the sake of expediency I haven't done that here. Let's go take a look at our file then, which we just exported, our JPEG. Just double click on that, and there is our map. Okay, so that's how you export 2 data frames showing 2 different raster layers of the same area. You can see how they both give very, very different data, but they also relate to each other. So for example, here we have a high area of altitude and displayed by the whiter shade, whereas down here we can see the transition between this lower area and this higher area is having a much higher slope. Similarly, along the banks of the river, as we'd expect, we have steeper slopes.